We're Zeke and Terri, midlife empty nest travel adventurers.
Join us as we navigate our lives and the world, mostly together.
Today's video is all about my favorite place on the planet.
Ooh, behind me on a tandem bike.
Wishful thinking, Zeke, and thanks for keeping it clean. We all know I'm talking about Paris, France.
Oh, your other favorite place on the planet.
I'm not even gonna go there. So we're moving on. I am a total Francophile, and whenever I land in Paris, it feels like I've come home. Most of France feels that way to me. In fact, about 7 years ago, I was asked to speak at a conference in Barcelona, so I flew into Toulouse, because that's what one does, rented a car, and drove to Spain, and I felt an energy shift as soon as I crossed into Spain from France. It really was the strangest thing.
That is strange. I too like Paris, just not in July and August when it's insanely hot and humid, and there's very little air conditioning. When we were there for your 40th birthday, it was in April, and that was great.
That was also a trip without kids, so perhaps the heat plus the crowds plus kids pretty much makes it your least favorite place on the planet.
In July and August. There's nothing like traveling with an angsty teenage boy to make even the best situation a challenge. I've been to Paris with you alone once, and twice as part of our home exchanges in 2013 and 2015.
And don't forget, we were there at the same time when we were both doing post-high school Europe trips, and you left a note for me at my hotel in Paris.
Yes, you were enjoying hotels as part of your 2.5-week art history tour, and I was sleeping on trains and in hostels as I backpacked through Europe on the cheap.
But my trip was only 2.5 weeks, and yours was the entire summer, so there's that. Regardless, I think Paris is always a good idea.
Which is why we are sharing some of our suggestions on how to get the most out of a trip to Paris in 2024 and beyond.
Keep in mind that this summer will be especially challenging with the Paris Olympics beginning in July and going through September with the Paralympics. There's still pent-up demand for travel, which means folks may go to Paris earlier, maybe May or June, or opt to go elsewhere in France or Europe.
We will be in Paris for a few days in May, and I look forward to seeing what has changed since I was last there in 2015.
I can't believe it's been that long for you. With an old city, you don't expect a lot to change, but with the pandemic, how we do things has changed. I was in Paris last May, and prior to that in August of 2022, and even a year made a big difference.
When we first went to Paris together in 2010, we got the museum pass, and it was fantastic. We didn't need any reservations, and we were able to get into the shorter lines since we were already ticket holders. This meant we saved a lot of time and saw more as a result.
Well, since COVID, the rules changed, and I had to make reservations for most of the museums and attractions, not just in Paris, but also in Amsterdam and Italy. There seems to be some evidence that this is no longer required for some sites, but per the Museum Pass website, places like the Louvre, L'Orangerie, Conciergerie, Saint-Chapelle, and Versailles still require timed reservations, even if you have the Museum Pass.
This will be something we explore when we are there in May.
I'd like to experiment, if you don't mind, by getting the Museum Pass to see what the experience is if we don't have reservations to some of the other sites like Musée de Cluny, the Picasso Museum, which I know is one of your favorites, and the d'Orsay.
We'll also see if we can book multiple timed entries into the Louvre with the Museum Pass, because that's our preferred way to visit, a few hours at a time. It's less overwhelming this way, but if we have to stand in a long security line, it may not be ideal.
Yeah, there's so much to see and do in Paris, including just sitting back and watching the world walk by, that anyone who visits Paris must allow for time to just be in Paris. Here's what we can tell you with absolute certainty about visiting Paris. You won't be able to do it all in one trip, so pace yourself.
Decide what kind of trip you want and then plan around it. There are plenty of guidebooks, blog posts, YouTube videos, and you can even use ChatGPT or Bing AI to look for your places to go.
And then find a place to stay that's within your budget near a metro stop that can get you to where you want to be. We took taxis during our first trip because I was nervous about taking the metro, but since then I've used public transportation for all of the other trips. The metro is so easy to use and I've always felt safe. My youngest even got me to take the bus 2 years ago, and I just might have the courage to use it again this May. If you want to use a rideshare company, download the Bolt app. It's like Uber and Lyft, but the company is out of Estonia. I use Bolt in all the countries that I can while in Europe.
As for accommodations, we've gotten frustrated with all the extra costs and fees with Airbnbs and their unpredictability. So we tend to stay in hotels. Terri prefers to stay with Accor hotels in France, specifically Mercures, as they are mid-range, which fits our budget. And they tend to be modern on the inside, clean, and have friendly and helpful staff.
Except the one that Adam and I stayed at in Bologna, which was in desperate need of remodeling. If you've never been to Paris, I'm sure there are a few places that are at the top of your list, like the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, l'Arc de Triomphe, and the Champs-Élysées, to name a few.
But there's so much more to see and do that may be less crowded. As we mentioned, the Picasso Museum is amazing, and we recommend it to everyone we talk to about Paris.
And walking along the Seine is an absolute must as well. Both sides offer up completely different views and perspectives.
As you've probably heard, Paris is broken down into arrondissements, starting with the first or premier in the center and spiraling clockwise. Most people, when they visit, tend to explore the 1st through the 8th.
To give you some context, the Louvre is in the 1st, the Musée with the Picasso Museum is in the 3rd, Notre Dame is in the 4th, the Sorbonne is in the 5th, the Luxembourg Gardens are in the 6th, the Eiffel Tower is in the 7th, and the l'Arc de Triomphe and the Champs-Élysées both are in the 8th.
The first arrondissement is on the north side of the Seine, also known as the right bank. It's home to the Louvre, which Terri thinks is a must-see in Paris. I'm not sure I agree, despite it being absolutely iconic in Paris.
Even when crowded, you can find parts of the museum that barely have any people in them. It's just so huge. There's also no wrong or right way to explore the museum. We like to go for a few hours before our brains max out.
Just outside the Louvre is the Jardin de Tuileries, a public garden located between the Louvre and the Place de la Concorde.
The Jardin de Tuileries was created by Catherine de Medici in 1564 and opened to the public in 1667. It's a beautiful garden to walk through and experience Paris. There are fountains, sculptures, lots of grassy areas, and you'll find people of all ages enjoying this public space. There's even a big Ferris wheel called the Rue de Paris. In August 2022, I learned through a magazine article that there is a mile-long tunnel under the Tuileries. While we were there, we experienced a graffiti exhibit within the tunnel. It was pretty incredible, although walking through it at night was a bit creepy as there were very few people enjoying the experience.
If you walk from the Louvre through the Tuileries, you will end up at the Musée de l'Orangerie, which is known for Monet's water lilies.
When you go, and I recommend that you do, be sure to venture downstairs. Not only are the bathrooms down there, but they have special exhibitions as well. Last May, there was an incredible Matisse exhibit. Speaking of bathrooms, whenever we need to use a restroom, if we aren't in a museum or attraction that has them, we will stop and enjoy a cup of coffee or a glass of wine at one of the street-side cafes. So Parisian. And if you need some water, don't hesitate to say to the waiter, "Un carafe d'eau, s'il vous plaît."
Also, keep in mind that if you are somewhere like a train station and sometimes a museum, you may need a euro to use the restroom, so keep a couple handy. Rue de Rivoli is the street that runs along the Seine on the north side. It has lots of touristy stuff, restaurants, fancy hotels, and can be very crowded. It's often nicer to just walk through the Tuileries.
Another place of interest in the first arrondissement is Place Vendome, with the fancy and expensive stores, including Louis Vuitton.
Terri always comments on the beautiful external artwork on the various Louis Vuitton buildings throughout Paris.
There's also the Ritz Paris, a very exclusive hotel on Place Vendome, which I recently learned is not part of the famed Ritz-Carlton brand, but is a standalone, independently owned hotel.
It is quite opulent inside and has the famed Hemingway bar. Keep in mind that this is an exclusive hotel and they do have a dress code.
Last May, they refused to let us in because our son Adam was wearing shorts. If you do manage to get in, the ladies' room is downstairs and is incredibly opulent with gold bird faucets, of all things. One day, I really do want to experience their high tea service because it looks absolutely beautiful. If you continue east along the Seine on Rue de Rivoli, you reach the 4th arrondissement, which has the Notre Dame, Saint-Chapelle, Hotel de Ville, Conciergerie, Centre Pompidou, Ile Saint-Louis, and part of Ile de la Cite.
Due to the fire in April 2019, Notre Dame isn't expected to reopen until December of 2024, but you can still appreciate the architecture from both sides of the Seine. It is located on Ile de la Cite, one of the two natural islands in the Seine River.
Ile de la Cite is considered the historic center of Paris and now has restaurants, patisseries, and shops, including Polonais, a chain of French stores with really cute household and personal items. There's also a great place to picnic at the northwest tip of Ile de la Cite near the Square de Vert Galant.
Also in the 4th is the Conciergerie and Saint-Chapelle, both part of the Palais de Justice. The concierge has medieval halls, guard rooms, and reconstructed prison cells, including the cell where Marie Antoinette was held before her execution.
The Conciergerie used to be a great place to get the museum pass because it wasn't as popular and it was cooler during the summer months. I still think it's a great place to visit. Nearby is the Royal Chapel, Saint-Chapelle, and it too is worth visiting for its Gothic architecture and gorgeous stained glass windows.
Neither of these take very long to visit. While Hotel de Ville is in the 4th, we haven't been inside because it's a working government building. In the plaza outside the building during the summer, they've installed sand volleyball courts and have had other recreational activities. One year there was a carousel. It's always interesting to see what's going on there, even if you can't go inside.
The Centre Pompidou is also in the 4th, and I went there for lunch in December of 2015. I enjoyed the views, and now that I know it's home to the National Museum of Modern Art, we may be adding that to our list for May.
Just north of the 4th is the 3rd arrondissement, better known as Le Marais. Many people love Le Marais, but my favorite thing to do here is to go to the Picasso Museum. We went shortly after it reopened in 2015 and were amazed at the variety of work he produced.
You walk from the bottom floor up to the top in a circular fashion, not unlike IKEA, and you see just how prolific of an artist he actually was. There were paintings, sculptures, drawings, ceramics, engravings spanning his entire career. It's one of the most extensive collections of Pablo Picasso's works in the world.
When people ask me what to do in Paris, it's the first thing I recommend because it's an incredible display of his work and it doesn't take all that long.
If you are in Le Marais, we recommend checking out Place de Vosges. It's one of the oldest and most beautiful squares in Paris, surrounded by mansions called Hôtels Particuliers, including Cour et Jardin de l'Hôtel de Sully, built in the 17th century.
Near the 4th arrondissement, some would say it's in the Le Marais, is the Hôtel de Saint. Built sometime between 1475 and 1519, this building is best known by tourists for the cannonball lodged in the wall of the facade during the Second French Revolution in 1830. Moving on to the 5th arrondissement, which is just across the river from the 4th on the left bank. This area is known as the Latin Quarter and is one of the oldest districts in Paris, with history dating back to Roman times, which explains Arenes de Lutece, one of the oldest remnants of Roman Paris.
It was a Roman amphitheater that could once seat 15,000 people and is now a public park. We stumbled into it after a visit to the nearby Jardin des Plantes and watched some men playing boule.
It was hilarious to hear them speak
Yeah.
to each other in French and swear in English when they lost a point.
That was surprising, to say the least. The Jardin des Plantes is the oldest park in Paris, established in 1626 as a medicinal herb garden for Louis XIII. There's a large botanical garden with massive greenhouses, a small zoo, and the Museum of Natural History. Also in the 5th is one of my favorite and often overlooked museums, the Musée de Cluny, also known as the Musée National du Moyen Âge, the Museum of Middle Ages. It has beautiful tapestries and armor, my favorites.
How appropriate. Didn't you go to a mosque in the 5th in 2022?
Yes, the Grande Mosquee de Paris. My friend Imen told us about it when I was in Paris with our second child, and neither of us had ever been to a mosque. It was unbearably hot that day. It was the summertime, it was August, and we enjoyed the cooling effect of the fountains and small pools inside.
If you go, legs and shoulders must be covered. If you do wear shorts or a skirt, they will provide shawls for you to wrap around yourself.
It was a fascinating experience, and one that we ended with a cup of hot mint tea in their tea room and big fans to cool us off.
The Pantheon, originally built as a church but now serving as a mausoleum, is also in the 5th. It is beautiful both inside and out.
West of the 5th arrondissement, still on the left bank, is the 6th, home to Jardin de Luxembourg. It's a beautiful park known for its lawns, tree-lined promenades, flower beds, and the Luxembourg Palace.
There are statues, fountains, and a large pond where children can sail model boats. It's a great place to enjoy people watching.
The 5th arrondissement is also known for its fancy shopping in the Saint-Germain on Boulevard Saint-Germain and surrounding streets. It's also where I get my frames for my glasses each time I visit. Oh, we forgot to mention there are quite a few places to refill your water bottles throughout Paris, like this one near Shakespeare & Co. If you haven't had enough churches, Saint-Sulpice is beautiful and known for its Delacroix frescoes and impressive architecture.
Continuing west from the 6th and now south of the 1st is the 7th arrondissement. It is probably the most notable for many people visiting Paris.
Here you have the Musée d'Orsay, the Musée Rodin, Les Invalides, and the Eiffel Tower.
There are many ways to experience the Eiffel Tower, including taking the stairs to the second floor, riding the elevator to the summit, dining in one of the restaurants like the Jules Verne, standing underneath it, or admiring it from across the river at the Trocadero.
It sparkles at night with a mini light show once an hour and during 14 Juillet, which is French Independence Day, also called Bastille Day. It's lit up with red, white, and blue lights. One year we sat on the Champ de Mars and watched the fireworks in celebration of the national holiday. It was beautiful.
When we had dinner at Jules Verne for our youngest's 9th birthday, we all enjoyed the frog legs and the slightly touristy experience, but we didn't get to go to the top because of the clouds. We had a very windy experience attempting to take a family picture.
I was recently asked by a friend to put together an itinerary for Paris in a day with their 17-year-old son and came up with a very busy day that started with the Eiffel Tower, followed by pastries on Rue Claire.
Rue Claire is a quaint Parisian street with shops and restaurants, including a place called Petite Claire that Terri has been to a few times.
They have free Wi-Fi, great service, and clean but small bathroom downstairs, and it's a great place to people watch. I may or may not have had too much wine there with a friend one time.
After Rue Claire, where do you suggest they go?
I suggested that they go to Les Invalides, which is the complex comprising of Musée de l'Armée, the church with the tomb of Napoleon, and various monuments to France's military history. The armor is pretty amazing in the museum, and the Dôme des Invalides is beautiful.
Not far from there is the Rodin Gardens and Musée Rodin. It's an open-air museum that showcases some of Rodin's sculptures, including The Thinker and Gates of Hell. There is no cost to wander the gardens, but there is a fee to go inside the house. Keep in mind, it is closed on Mondays.
We learned that one the hard way. Last but not least, in the 7th is Musée d'Orsay. I first went to this museum when I was there right after high school in 1988. I love the extensive collection of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist paintings and sculptures by Monet, Manet, Degas, Renoir, Van Gogh, and my favorite, Toulouse-Lautrec.
It's also our son Adam's favorite museum, and he can spend a lot of time there admiring the sculptures in the central area. It was once a train station, and the huge clock is always a great place to get a memorable photo.
The main restaurant is pretty good, despite it being a touristy spot. Pro tip though, get there right when it opens, which I think is at 12, because the line tends to get pretty long for the lunch rush.
Okay, now to the 8th arrondissement, the last that we will discuss in today's video.
We couldn't leave out the Arc de Triomphe, Champs-Élysées, Église de Madeleine, Place de Concorde, and the Petit Palais, which are all we're seeing when in Paris.
We mentioned the Place de la Concorde when speaking about the Jardin des Tuileries. It's the largest public square in Paris with the striking 3,300-year-old obelisk of Luxor that was gifted from Egypt in 1833.
We lovingly refer to the Place de la Concorde as the Circle of Death due to the lack of lanes and insane Parisian drivers. Please admire it from afar and avoid the crazy drivers.
The Champs-Élysées runs from the Place de la Concorde to the Arc de Triomphe and is famous for its cafes and luxury shops.
We don't tend to spend much time there, but it was great fun to be there in December to experience the Christmas market. There are some museums nearby, including the Petit Palais, which is home to the City of Paris Museum of Fine Arts. It's free of charge, always a bonus, unless you decide to take the audio tour, which wasn't expensive, and if I recall, it was really well done.
At the end of the Champs-Élysées is the Arc de Triomphe, a monumental triumphal arch commissioned by Napoleon to honor the French army. You can climb the 284 stairs to the top for some spectacular views of the city.
Also in the 8th is the Église de la Madeleine, which will always have a special place in my heart. When we were there in 2013, we saw a sign for a quartet playing Vivaldi's Four Seasons. It was at 8 p.m. on a Thursday night, so we went after dinner and enjoyed a magical experience.
The acoustics were wonderful, and it was an awe-inspiring experience to be in such an old place listening to beautiful music.
Our youngest, who was almost 9, fell asleep in my arms, too tired to enjoy the experience. Each time I've been back to Paris, I visit the Madeleine, and I always see a similar sign for the concert. I don't know if they do it all the time or if it's a coincidence, but it's worth attending if you have a chance.
I don't know if I'm excited or terrified to go back to Paris next month. I'm sure Terri is going to want to do way more than we have time for, especially since it's the end of our trip to Italy and France.
I think you'll be okay, Zeke. If I've learned anything from doing this recap of amazing places to visit in Paris, it's that I've been to Paris before, I will get to go to Paris again, so I don't need to do it all in one trip.
That's a relief to hear, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. No promises. Thanks for joining us as we relived many of our favorite places to visit in Paris between the 1st and 8th arrondissement.
We hope you're inspired to consider Paris for one of your next travel adventures. Be sure to check out the related blog post on our website for more details and links.
Also check out our Patreon page for some suggested itineraries, and feel free to send us an email if you have any questions or want more information. We're happy to help.
Especially when it comes to Paris. And if you have a favorite place or have heard of something we should check out, please send us an email so we can add it to our list for May or December, when we will most likely be there to visit our youngest and do the Christmas markets.
Another reason for us to not overdo it in May.
And now, back to navigating our lives and the world together. This is like the candy. You get this in I Love Lucy.